Animals. Let's talk about animals. Let's talk very quickly about animals with memory, animal concepts, and then we'll spend quite a bit of time on animal language. Everybody loves animal language. Animals. Okay. Same basic issues that you should recall from the previous lecture, just objections to artificial intelligence, which are going to be very structurally similar to these concepts in evolution. Cool. All right, we didn't talk about memory. Arguably we should have, but I don't know. There are many kinds of memory. Depending on who you ask, we divide it into either two kinds or three. So working memory sometimes is called a third kind of memory, but there is a distinction between short-term and long-term, and sometimes it's considered just a kind of short-term memory. In long-term memory, we have a lot of other divisions, right? So we have declarative memory that's more implicit, or sorry, that's explicit. These are like actual memories that you have, like you think of particular events in your life where you're a character. Sometimes you think about sentences that you believe, like you believe the Magna Carta was signed in 1225, but you probably don't remember who told you that, unless I just gave you some brand new news. Sorry. But there's a bunch of other things that I'm sure you remember that you don't remember where you learned them. Non-declarative memory, there's quite a few of those. Procedural memory is going to be the one that's relevant for animal cognition here. That's like remembering tasks. So you know how to ride a bike. It's a different kind of memory than the sentence, I know how to ride a bike, that you remember what bikes are or whatnot. At the very bottom, I'm associating brain structures that we think are primarily associated with these, but there's quite a bit more stuff here to think about. So this is a video, watch it separately. You'll see that chimpanzees are better than you in most respects. In this case in particular, their working memory is superior, just like lightning fast. Just try to keep up with them. But there's also other kinds of creatures that exhibit what might be called some working memory. And we tend to associate creatures that do a lot of spatial learning or storage. So it might not be the case that chipmunks actually remember where their nuts are buried, but they actually like have a good sense of smell to detect other nuts that are buried. But there are some creatures that definitely do remember where they put things or where items exist in nature, what flowers they visited and what they were like. So these are, a lot of this behavior seems to imply some form of memory. Whether it behaves in the same way our working memory does or not is again going to be a question for whether you accept Morgan's canon from the last lecture or not. Short section, animals have lots of really cool instances of memory. None of that's very controversial, right? We think about animal memory and it is just impressive. There are creatures that remember, see, elephants never forget thing, right? Like there are creatures that genuinely don't forget humans that they've encountered decades before. Perhaps more impressive would be something like other kinds of learning, other kinds of behavior, learning culture, for example. There's evidence that whales teach each other songs, that birds learn songs from their culture or their environment. A lot of people aren't that impressed by some of that behavior because learning songs could just be repetition. But there are elephant graveyards. Elephants tend to go to certain places to die. And when elephants go by these so-called elephant graveyards, they tend to pause, and people describe it as a mourning behavior. Skeptics sometimes say that this isn't mourning behavior at all. This is elephants just recognizing the vague smell of an elephant and trying to figure out what it is. Again, Morgan's canon versus non-Morgan's canon. Tool use, right? So there are creatures that use tools that are not humans. In fact, there are creatures that use tools to get other tools in order to do the behavior. A tool here we're just describing as something that is not in and of itself beneficial, but is helpful to get something else that is beneficial. Dolphins use tools, crows and chimpanzees. I'll show you a cool video. Different monkeys use tools. It's fairly common to use tools. This is a little more controversial, but you know, what makes it controversial is the depth of their understanding of the tool, not that they actually use tools. And then Alex, you saw the video in the last section. One of the cool things about Alex, this gray parrot who sadly passed away, is that he seemed to be able to understand properties that rightly described are concepts, right? He could tell the difference between color and shape and material and number. He could attribute sameness and difference. Now, whether you think that he had a prototype view of concepts or an exemplar understanding of concepts, he certainly was able to cluster things in ways that humans recognize. So he was at least able to understand the clustering that we use, which is some kind of concept that he had access to. And that's impressive because if you recall from our phylogeny in an earlier video, birds are not that closely related to us, right? Like birds are dinosaurs, both literally and figuratively. They are fairly distantly related. So the fact that they understand concepts either implies that concepts are older or that they've evolved multiple times, or at least the ability to understand concepts has evolved multiple times. All right, I'm gonna stop here, a short 2-section video, because the next video is gonna be the majority of this.